Greetings, one and all, and welcome to a special impromptu episode of the 1904 Club with myself, Kathryn and Fletch. Kathryn, we'll start with you. I know it's late. How was your deadline day?
Well, from a work point of view, my deadline day is on Thursday, so I'm now kind of building up to that. So sort of seeing your tired face, I'm just anticipating that will probably be me on Thursday. And I've also just noticed your incredible jumper because you were sort of sat further down before, and now you've sat up. That is remarkable.
Thank you. That's very nice of you. No, people aren't normally that nice to me, Fletch. Come on, restore parity. Call me names.
Your jumper's rubbish.
Oh,
you should have been a tiger and not a zebra on your jumper, Baz. What are you doing?
Sorry.
Or is it an exotic horse?
You missed the one where I have the shirt with the traffic cone on in homage to Partridge. I'm waffling. It's been one of those. So we're coming to you at 9:25, and the big question before we came on air was: is it acceptable when you got up at 4:30 in the morning to make your way into the office and get everything prepped for deadline day to order a takeaway? And the unanimous peer pressure was from Kathryn and Fletch that yes, it is. So yes, I have ordered some food because I didn't get anything in the office.
But what have you ordered, Baz? That's the question.
I'm not sure how this is going to go down. So I ordered chicken shawarma.
Not wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Love a shawarma.
Yeah, I do like it, but the trouble is, takeaways are rubbish, aren't they? By the time they get to you, it's just so. But I'm that knackered, and I was like, I might just have a toasted bagel or some toast. And I was like, no, come on, let's play the game. Anyway.
Kathryn's got a grin on her face as if,
that sounded so depressing, the toasted bagel. I did tell Baz before we started recording he should have ordered a bottle of wine as well, which is what I did in January when the women's transfer deadline day went all the way to like 11 p.m. But he seems to have been sensible and not done that on a Monday evening.
Yeah, I'm not really.
But isn't that technically drinking at work?
What are you saying?
I'm just saying, I'm not trying to rat KB out here, but isn't that officially drinking at work?
Technically, I suppose. Yeah.
Sometimes,
needs must,
on
isn't
the
it?
job is advised.
I mean, given what
I didn't open a bottle of wine until the window closed. I will clarify that. I wasn't there for like 2 hours before, waiting for it to finish. Sorry, my coffee's not very good. I've had about 3 glasses of wine already.
Very good. Well done.
Given the quality of defending on offer at Ashton Gate on Saturday, few could be forgiven when I went back to my hotel of I don't really drink, though, to be fair. I'm not a wine connoisseur, so I've gone for tango and shawarma. Right, let's get this show on the road because there'll be people listening to this going, look, you three, it's 9:30, you're chatting nonsense. Let's talk about transfers. But it really is, Kathryn. When you get to this stage, it's hysteria, isn't it?
It is as well, and I think just with the summer that the club has had and everything that's kind of gone on, you get to deadline day, and obviously, like it can be exciting for fans. I think us guys kind of working in it, sometimes you get to deadline day and you just think, oh, like here we go. It's sort of like one of the busiest days of the year. But I think also listening to the manager after Saturday's game, I think he'll be pleased. The window's closed now, and they've got the players in that they wanted to get in today. And hopefully now he can look at the squad, work out what his best team is, and not have that kind of uncertainty hanging over him in terms of who he can get in a building and who might have been potentially going out. I think everyone will be pleased to see that window shut now.
Yeah, just to recap on today. So Abu Kamara's move to Getafe at the 55th attempt has finally been confirmed. At one point today, it was off. Not completely off, but it looked like it wasn't going to happen. The Spanish FA were saying no, which threw City's move for Amir Hadziahmetovic completely into chaos. So the club were wanting to announce that kind of on Friday, but obviously he was waiting for his visa, despite the fact that Kamara had signed the contract in Spain on Friday night, and I saw a picture of him signing the contract. So we knew it was done. The Spanish FA didn't ratify it because of Getafe's own transfer problems. At one point today, it looked like, and Swansea had kind of been bubbling away in the background with respect to Swansea. Abu's first choice was always going to be Getafe and Madrid, not the Mumbles. But it was the classic transfer domino effect where you needed one deal to be done to complete the other. So luckily, Kamara's deal was done. That he's gone to Getafe on a loan for the season, option to buy. That means Amir's move from Besiktas has been confirmed, so he's now officially signed. And the one we spoke about, we referenced over the weekend was Darko Gyabi coming in from Leeds United. Incredible piece of business that I think a couple of years ago, Man City sold him to Leeds as part of the Calvin Phillips deal for £5 million. And now he's come to Hull City on effectively on a free transfer, although Leeds have got a massive sell-on clause, but that's the quirk of the situation the City are in. So they've signed two players, and because lots of questions as to why they've been able to get him in, not move somebody out, I think largely because of his age and his salary. So I think that's probably why they've been able to get him in without moving somebody. And there was loose interest in Casey Palmer, but it never really amounted to anything serious. Crucially, Fletch, they've been able to keep Charlie Hughes, £10 million bid turned down the other day from Coventry, and Ivor Pandor.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, as an undertone, shows that they're not too concerned about their financial situation either. Because if it was dire straits where they needed to find a certain amount of cash in a very short period of time, then those two players stick out as members of the team who are going to be able to solve that mini crisis if it was there. So to get them to staying at the MKM Stadium is a massive plus. I'm interested in the Kamara transfer because looking at how Getafe play, so just to go through the transfer, it's a loan with an option to buy rather than an obligation, Baz, is that right?
That's my understanding. And going back a few weeks, when I put out that initially they were looking at buying him permanently for about £3 million. Well, that is roughly what I understand the option to be. I think it's in the region of about £3 million that Getafe can buy him, but it's not, as I understand it, it is not an obligation, merely an option.
So from that position, you've got a player who's gone on loan now to a club playing in La Liga against some of the best wingers and fullbacks the world has to offer. So he's going to be tested completely. Getafe play a different system. They like to play like a 3-5-2 or a 5 at the back, whatever you call it. So it's going to be different to what he's been playing in at Hull City. Now, you could end up having a player come back who has been tried and tested, and suddenly, if City stay in the Championship, it might give him a progression where he becomes a better player. Or alternatively, your quid's in at the end of next season and you can spend that money on somebody else, or you can make an expensive loan deal. So that one in particular feels like a win-win for City.
Kathryn, for Kamara, I mean, it's two years in a row where he's had chaos on deadline day, because this time last year he was driving up the motorway waiting for confirmation that his move to City, that Norwich had signed the player they were trying to sign, and that his move to City was on. So he must revel in the drama. I know he's been out in Madrid for the best part of a week, but it's a huge opportunity for him. And as Fletch says, for City, if he goes out to Spain and plays well, the worst case scenario is that they buy him, or he comes back and potentially his value's increased, or they get a better player because he's played with respect to the Championship at a far higher level, and he's going to be potentially playing in the Nou Camp and the Bernabeu and the Mestalla and the Wanda Metropolitano, and he's going to be playing against some of the biggest football clubs on the planet. And as Fletch says, some of the best players. What an experience for him.
Yeah, I mean, he has downgraded sort of, spending deadline day in Madrid this year compared to spending deadline day in Hull last year. But I mean, yeah, I think for Kamara, I think we've all kind of felt like over the last year that there's definitely a player in there. We've just not kind of seen it on a consistent basis in terms of him, getting those goals and assists week in, week out. And hopefully he goes there and makes a success of it. And whether that means, he comes back and then goes on a permanent, or he goes somewhere else and the club, get a little bit of money back for him. Or like you say, he comes back having had a good experience and then can kind of, use that in the team here. I mean, I still think it's a shame that we could never quite get the best out of him when he was wearing a Hull City shirt, and whether we still can, not out of the question. But I hope for him as a person, I think, he had all of that kind of the difficult situation last year, where he had a bit of a rocky time, and then he seemed to, kind of overcome it. And, hopefully he can kind of go and enjoy himself over there and have a good loan spell, and is all the better for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the players that have come in then. We touched on Darko Gyabi coming in from Leeds. 21-year-old midfielder, played I think 43 times for Plymouth last season, had a spell there before the season before but got injured. He's played at various levels for England from 15s through to 21s. He's 6'5", so he's physical, he's big, he's strong. He's one of, I make it 12 new signings in summer. It would be 13, but read Lalui, it looks like, well, that they haven't got that move over the line, the loan deal over the line. Quite what's going to happen, that they're exploring their options. So taking Lalui out of it, obviously Puerta's gone, done and dusted. He's back at Leverkusen. 12 new signings, and I make it with players that have gone out on loan like Burstow, Harvey Cartwright, Jake Leake, etc. Amir, 19 departures. Kathryn, in terms of the window as a collective, given the mess they've got themselves into with the embargo and the restrictions, how do you reflect on the window as a whole, given the fact they can't buy anybody, they can't pay loan fees? So, the Leeds have done a return with Galhart and Darko as well. What's your kind of assessment on the window? And if I have to dive off, it means my food's been delivered, so I apologise, and I'll let these two talk far more coherently than I will.
I think the window as a whole, given the restrictions the club will work into, I think they've done a pretty decent job in terms of getting players with championship experience in, getting some good young players in on loan. I still think I'm still slightly concerned about the depth in certain areas. If key players get injured, if you lose Ollie McBurney, if you lose Charlie Hughes to an injury, I still think there's certain positions, certain players in the team that if they get, a knock or whatever, suddenly you feel like there's not quite enough quality in the depth sort of there. But I think overall, I think it's definitely done a reasonable job. I think, given the restrictions they were working to, as I say, I think if you'd have asked me when the transfer embargo first came in, and you would have told me all the players that they managed to bring into the club, I would have thought then, wow, that's you'd have bitten your hand off for it, wouldn't you? So I think, to be fair, I think credit goes to the people kind of running that show in the recruitment department. Obviously, as I say, we're not living in an ideal world. I would have liked maybe another centre back in just because of the situation we had a couple of weeks ago where we looked defensively a little bit light, but we're not obviously in that kind of situation. So given how it could have gone, I think I'm pretty pleased. Whether there's a possibility they might need to bring more people in January, it might mean more people going out, but all in all, pretty decent, I would say.
And Fletch, we saw on Kathryn's absolutely right in terms of, like, you've lost Ijai, you've lost Famiwo, suddenly you're having to play with Qatar McCarthy, and he's a great prospect. But that was it was a massive baptism of fire, if I can say that. And then at Ashton Gate on Saturday, they've obviously missed Matt Crooks and his area ability, his strength, and just his general experience. But so they were really poor in midfield, so open. But they've gone out and signed two midfielders. Yes, I know Amir was coming in the door in theory before Bristol City, and had Abu's move gone through earlier, perhaps Thursday, he would have been in the team maybe. But they've now gone out and got two midfielders. You've kept Regan Slater. You've got Crooks coming back. It won't be unlikely for Swansea, but probably Southampton just after. So suddenly their midfield options, they look like they've got a bit more kind of power and particularly height as well, with him being 6'5", Darko.
Yeah, toughness is something that comes to mind as Baz mutes his mic and has done a very Partridge-esque runaway to go and collect his food. From the point, yeah, they were dicing with the idea of having players that, from an injury point of view, appear to be more fragile. However, they're still very good players when they're match fit. And if Hull City can keep their best 11 fit, then they're going to be all right. To give you a run through from your point, KB, about if McBurney gets injured, we haven't seen Destan yet. However, Destan is going to be an unknown quantity, given that he's never kicked a ball in the Championship. Geldart can play there too. So it is going to be interesting. But to pick up on what your assessment of the window, I see it as a bit like putting blinkers on a racehorse, if you like, because they've been given a clear set plan of what they can and can't do, and they've actually used that efficiently rather than being more scattergun and throwing money left, right, and centre about to try and bring in certain players that, probably contained risk in the sense of they were either unproven at the level, maybe the figures weren't right, and I think they've treated their transfer situation with a lot more respect than they have done previously, and I think they've done quite well. I think they've got building blocks going forward. There's a solid base there of a team to at least get them in the right direction going up the league. Is it promotion worthy? Who knows? It's the Championship. Anything can happen. But I think the fan base as well, just to throw some comments out there. Oliver says, pleased to have the extra midfield bodies. Very happy with the transfer business we've done as a whole. Would probably have liked another centre-back to have been brought in, but he thinks the squad looks enough to be solid mid-table material. Harvey says, with Panda staying, do we expect him to get a new contract over the coming months, or will that be an issue with the wage cap, Baz?
I think it's something they're looking into, without a doubt. My biggest concern, Kathryn, and to you as well, Fletch, is this is something we touched on the pod way back in the summer when they signed signed Shemi Ajayi, and then later when Firmino came in, was that on paper excellent. And I mean, Ajayi is just he's superb, but with the concern we highlighted back in the summer was his durability. He played 15 times for Albion last year, and in reality, if he plays 35, 40 times, they probably don't let him go. So you were taking a risk. He was exceptional at Coventry, exceptional. He's been a big miss. And Firmino, we knew he had trouble last season. He's come in, he's made a couple of off the bench appearances, and he's out as well. So that, on paper, you would say, well, they sold McLaughlin, they sold Jones, and it was probably both those players wanted to move on. Fair enough. They've done 5 years, 6 years, it's fine. And on paper, they'd signed probably better players, but they haven't signed the durability. Jones and McLaughlin are always available. So that's my only gripe, but that's a quirk of the situation. If they could go out and spend £5 million on the centre-half that played 46 games, they would have done that. They can't. So you have to tailor your approach. What I would ask, Kathryn, obviously the owner's taken a huge amount of flack for the situation that City have got themselves into, whether it's the head of finance, whether it's somebody else. Ultimately, the owner carries the can because he employs the people to do the job. And if that job's not done, he has to carry the can. And obviously the club has been in an organisational tiz because of the situation with the embargo and everything. Has he shown an element of ambition, though, in terms of the summer work, particularly turning down, for any club in the Championship, turning down big money? But when you're a club with City with no parachute payments, that's not easy to turn down £10 million for Charlie Hughes. And then, there was never anything firm in terms of 5 million. They wanted 5 million for Pandor to have a conversation. That never really came. But even so, to not go, well, okay, we'll sell him for 2.5 million. Have they shown quite big ambition this summer in signing McBurney, for example, Lundstrom, and one or two others?
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to give them credit for, like you say, it might have been easier to balance the books with that if they'd have accepted that £10 million. I think they were always in that position, though, that they knew if they accepted it, they weren't going to be able to spend it. So I think they have got one eye on next summer, probably knowing that if the club is still in the Championship, Charlie Hughes will probably be looking to move on because I imagine there might be Premier League interest. He'll probably see himself being in the Premier League in a year's time, potentially, depending on, obviously, how well he does this season and how, his injury record goes. But I think the owner realised, it wouldn't have gone down well if he'd have accepted that £10 million, even though it might have, helped financially. So sometimes you have to hold your nerve a little bit. And I think the majority of fans would say it was the right decision because you lose Charlie Hughes. I mean, we saw it against Blackburn. And I know he didn't have the best game against Bristol, but, I think the whole defence against Bristol had a poor day. he's such a miss when he's not there. And given the injury concern with Ajay, I can't pronounce his name for some reason, Ajay. If he's going to be struggling to be fit for every game, selling Hughes would have been catastrophic, really. So I think he does deserve credit for, as I say, holding his nerve a little bit. But also, he clearly realised the situation that sell Charlie Hughes now, you can't get a replacement in. Wait till next summer, you might get a little bit more money. All right, his fee could drop off, but realistically, you would expect if he performs to his level, it's only going to increase from 10 million. And at least next summer, all being well, they would be able to reinvest that.
And Fletch, the optics of selling Hughes against the backdrop of everything that the club have got themselves into would have been disastrous, wouldn't it? And with Adrian already under intense pressure, and I think fan criticism has gradually increased over the last year or so, probably since last summer and the Fenerbahce stuff. And I think there's been a section of fans that have become a bit disillusioned. Then obviously the stuff about the finances come out. Then the club gets embargoes and fee restrictions, and suddenly it feels like it's starting to unravel a bit. That there's starting to be a sea change of opinion around the future of the owner. If he'd have sold Hughes and taken the money, then perhaps that process is expedited a little bit. The fact he's put his, obviously not publicly, but through the media, the local media, he's put his hand up and going, whatever Coventry offer, we're going to say no. Admittedly, if somebody had come in with 15, 16 million pounds, then I think we'd all probably agree that is, even given the situation, you probably couldn't turn down at this stage of the summer. But the optics of selling him for 10 million, they've done well to keep him, haven't they? That's probably as big a statement as signing Ollie McBurney and anybody else they've signed.
Yeah, I think as well, the figures of 15 and 16 million, if you compare the situation that Jacob Greaves was in, I think Hughes is a year behind Greaves in terms of his stature in the Championship. So I think they were never really going to get towards that kind of figure. Yes, I said it in the first bit, and I take your point, but I think it would have come across to me, probably not as strong as it did at the time, but I remember back in 2019, 2020, when Bowen and Grzycki both went on the transfer deadline day with no one coming in return. So that's the closest thing that you can relate it to. However, we all knew Bowen's ability at the time. Bowen was probably the best winger, if not, it's certainly in the top three wingers in the Championship at the time. Do you put Hughes as in the best three in the centre halves in the Championship? Probably not. He's not far away. He's probably one of the better centre halves. But yeah, it would have shown that. I think it would have shown that there was a glass ceiling for Hull City this season by getting rid of Hughes. I think there's a glass ceiling anyway, but it would have been lowered slightly if you'd lost Hughes. Just to add a couple of questions to the discussion, Taylor Bedford asks, were there any players that were close to joining that we can hear about, Baz? And also one that I'll box off from Matt, any possibility of any free transfers after the deadline happening? As far as I understand it, Baz, free transfers can happen whenever they want during the season because they're out of contract, so they're not contracted to any clubs.
Yeah, let's start with that question first. Free transfers, yeah, they did it with João Pedro and Steven Alzate back in September last year. And in fairness, those two deals actually worked out quite well because João Pedro turned out to be the top goal scorer. And although it was only 6 goals, those 6 goals kept them in the league. And Alzate was at times a joy to watch. Yeah, he wasn't perhaps the most dynamic of midfielders, but some of his play at times was beautiful. And he cost them nothing, and he's gone for a couple of million quid, and they've gained on it. So at the minute, no, there's no plans for that to happen, and they just have not got. This is something to reiterate actually. So they're already at the maximum of their squad allowance, and it's not necessarily to do with the transfer restrictions. They're just on the cusp of FFP. They're right on the limit of it, and if they spend much more, they'll get their bottoms tickled, and they might be in a spot of bother. So it is a case of they haven't got the reason it's been 1 in 1 out for the last couple of weeks is because they are so tight financially with FFP. It's not because the EFL have said, right, you cannot buy anybody else, bring anybody else in. it is purely down to FFP. So we think the reason they've been able to get Darko in from Leeds is because of his age and his relatively low salary compared with if you brought in a £20,000 a week player or £25,000 a week player, for example. So I don't envisage free transfers happening anytime soon. But what I will say is they are quite crafty. They are in terms of, and like a lot of clubs, they find ways to do things here and there. It's unlikely, but you'd never rule it out. In terms of players that they missed out on, yeah, there's loads. We know about Jason Kumas. I remember him scoring for West Brom. Lewis, his son, which makes me. I mean, I'm 41 tomorrow. That's scary. I remember Jason playing and what a player he was. Anyway, Lewis Kumas, he was one player. We know about Lewis O'Brien, that they really wanted him, but the financials, obviously Louis Barry, which kicked all this whole process, out. So he was another one. I think Anthony Masaba was one from, if I've got his name right, who was a winger at Sheffield Wednesday. He ended up going to Turkey. There was who was the Owen Beck, the left back from Liverpool, who was at Blackburn last year.
Was there any on deadline day that came close to, Baz?
Say again?
Was there any today that they were close to signing?
No, not really, because of the situation they're in. So they knew it. Essentially, it was going to be one in, one out, and it was always going to be Kamara going and Amir coming in. Then, obviously, a few days ago, Darko that transpired, and they were able. I think he turned down four or five other clubs, two of which were in France, to come to City. So they started chasing that one. I think had the interest in Casey Palmer become anything other than a loose conversation on Friday, they would have had a plan. Obviously, the same with Eva Pandor. There was the Besiktas goalkeeper who was one of three. They had three targets. He was one of them. So even today, they had a plan. If somebody, I know West Ham were linked a while ago for Pandor. It never got anywhere. But I had somebody have come in, like clubs panicked, don't they, on deadline day. Had a West Ham or a Leicester panicked for Panda, and Club City gone, yeah, £5 million. They were ready to act, I think, with a goalkeeper. But Ivo wanted to stay. The manager wanted to keep him. I mean, the manager wanted to keep Abu Kamara. He didn't want to let him go. But yeah, there was nothing apart from having backup plans if a big bid came in for Regan Slater and he went, they would have had options to move into. But realistically, coming in today, I've consistently been told over the weekend that it's Amir and Darko. They're the only two, and Abu out. If something happens, then we have a plan, but we don't actively want to do anything right now. We're not letting Charlie. I mean, Charlie. It's been maintained from the start. Charlie's not going unless as I said before, you were talking 15, 16 and above. And realistically, for a player that's only played 50 championship games, that was highly unlikely. I mean, Greavesy, as you touched on, Fletch, went for 17 and a half, and he played 200 games. Charlie's played 50 games in the championship. He's only played 31 for Hull City, so he's still a baby in that respect. So I know you can never rule it out on deadline day because clubs panic and things go mad, as we've seen today. But yeah, I don't think anything was, apart from those two, was particularly close.
I think we have to remember as well, KB, that City have players like Mataza, Balumi, Miller, all still to come back. And I imagine they're going to feel like new signings anyway, aren't they?
Yeah, we saw a little bit of Balumi against Bristol. I mean, he was involved in Kyle Joseph's goal, it was obviously great to see Joseph finally kind of get on the score sheet, as kind of, disappointing as the result was. And that was only his kind of second he had a little bit of time against Blackburn. And that was encouraging, I thought. He had a chance to score, Balumi, as well. He had that shot that he sort of put wide. And considering he's been out for so long, I thought, that was a good little bit of spell for him. He showed that he can offer something a little bit different. And as you say, I think Matazo will be the one. Granted, you're going to have to give him a bit of time with all three of the ACL injuries. It's going to take all three of them time to get back up to speed. But before he got injured last season, I was so impressed with Matazo and what he offered to the midfield. So, you're kind of anticipating his return, but also, acknowledging that it'll take them a little bit of time to get up to speed. Maybe with the types of players that they are, Miller and Bellamy, because they're kind of the forward-thinking ones. Adrenaline might see him through a little bit. I think when you're a midfielder or a defender coming back from an ACL, I think it's a little bit tougher to kind of ease yourself back in. But Bellamy so far so good.
Yeah, I've got going forward. I've got no. My biggest worry about them going forward is kind of like an old man's theory on I just wince every time Bellamy gets the ball, and I'll be the same when Liam comes back, because I love Liam, the Canadian Messi, and the same for Elliot, because when they've I suffer with knee problems on a daily basis, so I know how temperamental they are, and you just worry that they're going to be okay. You just want to protect them, but you want to basically wrap them in cotton wool whilst also playing them. But yeah, going for. I've really enjoyed watching Joel Ndala play. He will get better as the season goes on. I thought David Akintola. I've been a bit cynical about the players that have come from the Super League, because generally they've not, whatever nationality, the Super League players, two fan excluded under Liam, have not. It's not worked out. But I thought I saw enough from Akintola the other day. I thought if he can stay on side, he's the way he took the ball and moved for the opening goal, and the through ball for Gauhart was superb. There was one he created second half for Kyle, where he took it past his man a couple of times, got to the byline and clipped in across, and Joseph headed over, I think via deflection, although we didn't get a corner. So he looks good. So going forward, obviously if McBurney gets injured, that's a concern. But Kyle scored, so maybe that helps his confidence. He's just going the other way. They look so resolute and solid at Coventry. And what have they conceded? 11 or 12 goals in the game since Coventry. Is it all down to Shemi Ajayi? If it is, we've got a big problem. That's an area, Fletch, and Kathryn as well, that he's really got to nail down, because, as much as there's a lot to be enthused by about Sergei and the way he operates, and also the squad they've got now. But you can't be conceding 3s and 4s and expect to be getting anywhere, can you?
I'm going to throw this to KB because I'm more concerned at the minute and more focused on Scarborough's defensive situation and attacking situation. I don't feel very qualified at the moment.
Yeah, it was frustrating against Bristol because I think we've spoken about how the two fullbacks, Drameh and Giles, have started the season really well, and going forward, we're really good against Coventry and Oxford. We're more limited against Blackburn, and I felt like it was similar against Bristol. The thing for me is we let crosses come into the box too easily, and that's on both sides. But then we didn't defend the crosses well enough in the middle, which is you sort of look at your two centre backs. I know Drameh with the second and third one, I think, was beaten at the back post for the first contact, and then the guy in the middle had a free shot twice. Drameh did play a little bit of a hospital pass to Hughes, but again, Hughes kind of probably should have dealt with that better. Just get rid of it rather than try to control it and then play out from the back. And Giles was a little bit poor on the fourth goal. So I don't think the back four as a collective had a great day. I think there was goals, situations where all four of them could have done better at different times. I do wonder whether Brandon Williams is going to be pushing somebody in that back four. Naturally, you would assume it would be Giles first because he's a left back. I know he can play at right back as well, and he could fill in at centre back if he needed him to. I don't know. It's difficult with Giles because he did start the season so well and so much better than what we'd seen from in a City shirt, and you sort of felt like this is the player that Middlesbrough that was so good at Middlesbrough, and then both him and Drameh, they just let themselves down at times. I don't know if it's concentration, if it's positional work, and I'm not letting the two centre backs off either because, like I say, when the crosses did come into the box, they were second to the ball, and people seem to have kind of free shots and free headers. But I would be questioning whether does he keep the back four the same at Swansea, or does he look to make a change? Because Ajayi has obviously been a big miss, but I think the way they've defended since it can't all be down to the fact that he's not in the team. So they need to get a grip on, and it was a problem last season as well from them conceding from crosses. It's not a new problem, so they do need to get a grip on that. And I think if I was Brandon Williams, I'd be kind of I should be pushing one of these players, whichever side it's on. I thought we looked a little bit better when Louis Coyle came on at right back, slightly defensively. I mean, he was on when the fourth goal was, and again, it was from the right side where the first cross came in. So, but generally, apart from that one time, we did look a little bit better. But both fullbacks now have got people behind them, hopefully pushing them for their place. So it'd be interesting to see whether he does make a change at Swansea or if he keeps it the same.
It was almost like a perfect storm because Ivor was awful. I mean, the first goal, the pass he played out to Giles was never gave Giles a chance. And as soon as he turned around, he was closed down. He tried to get rid of it, and the cross got blocked. And then the lad at the back post had a run on Drame. And Egan was awful. Hughes, obviously, the inexplicable for the third goal. Right on, if they're going at half time, 2-1 down, maybe it's a different game. You just don't know. But the way that Charlie did that was inexplicable. I guess this is probably a question none of us three could answer, and it's one for Prutz next time. But I just wonder, and this was something I asked the manager afterwards at Bristol City, what impact, because there's been a lot of talk, all summer there's been a lot of talk about Ivor. Right, I remember out in Turkey, it was a subject. Obviously Charlie as well, more recently, and firm bids this time for Charlie, big bids. What impact that had on those two players specifically, but then also the collective, lots of uncertainty. And when you've got a lot of transfer uncertainty around players, they don't know if they're coming, if they're going, it can create a negative atmosphere, can't it? And the manager basically said that was a thing. And he also said that there's certain things that the players were doing he didn't recognise, and he's going to sort it out. So, Kathryn, is that, do we expect after the international break at Swansea and going forward that now they've had, by the time we get to Swansea, it's pretty much 2 weeks from today, from the window closing, and plenty of time to kind of clear the heads a little bit and put the window, it's in the past by the time they get to South Wales. Can that, we'll see a different City than we've seen in the last couple of games?
Well, I hope so, because I think if they defend like they did against Bristol at Swansea, they'll have a really tough afternoon, because I think Swansea are a decent team. And maybe Prutz is more qualified, having been in professional football, to answer that question. But I felt like it was a little bit of an excuse, him saying that the transfer window was affecting them, because they were fine against Coventry. And that was days after Coventry had made a bid for Charlie Hughes. There was no kind of problems in that game. Coventry had opportunities, but they was pretty solid defensively. They were fine for most of the game against Wrexham. It was only the last few minutes where they seemed to lose their heads, and when he made changes to the back line. I thought for the majority against Oxford, they were all right, apart from 2 long throw-ins, which they didn't deal with. And, they could have definitely defended them better. It's only been Blackburn where defence was, massively changed. And then Bristol where I think they've been bad. And I don't think enough has significantly changed in that period of time to put it all down on the fact that there's uncertainty with transfers, because there's been uncertainty with transfers for the whole, since the season started. So I felt like that was maybe, not the overriding factor. And I was a little bit more concerned with old habits creeping into certain kind of, members of the defence. But I still go back to the fact that we let crosses come in far too easily last season, and we didn't defend them well in the box, and that was an issue last season. And I think that's still something we've not quite resolved. So, I mean, hopefully, just having the window closed is a good thing, and it can be there in the back of a player's mind potentially. I don't think it was why they conceded 4 goals against Bristol, but it is helpful to have that kind of situation out of the way. But I do think Swansea will be a really tough game. Also based on the fact that our form after the international break last season was not very good. So
it wasn't.
I was going to say it can't get any worse, and I don't want to reference the Mick McCarthy video again. But surely, hopefully, it can't go on like that.
And Fletch, just to rattle through on the final Bristol thing. I mean, I think they conceded 17 shots in the first half, 29 by full time, of which Bristol City hit the bar or woodwork anyway 3 times. But that said, for those that care about XG, I think Bristol's was about 3.5 and City's was nearly 2.5. So they had 49 shots between them, and for City to go away from home and have 20 attempts, it shows that there's reason to be optimistic about the top half of the pitch, which last season it was a complete non-event. They just need to tweak that back end of the pitch. But you've got, interestingly, Fletch, Kathryn touched on this on Brandon Williams. I think Brandon Williams and Louis Coyle are both going to play in the 21s at the MKM Stadium on Tuesday night. Free entry for everybody, by the way. I think 7 o'clock kickoff in the Premier League Cup against Birmingham City. So a good opportunity for those two to get valuable minutes, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And look, the phrase, Rome wasn't built in a day is the same premise for every championship club, because nobody is at their best after 4 games unless you're Middlesbrough, who have got a 100% win record and only conceded once. I mean, who would have thought Sheffield United would have been bottom of the table below Sheffield Wednesday after 4 games, eh?
Well, it's funny. It's funny on that, because it's not too long ago, before they signed Alfie, that all their fans, the Borough fans, were raging that, Rob Edwards has got no pull. We've signed nobody. It's an absolute shambles, etc., etc. And I was listening to 5 Live Monday Night Club in the car, and you got Carlos Ara phoning up talking about Ruben, because obviously they've just been beat again, four defeats, or if you include the cup defeat at Birmingham, and I watched that, they were terrible. So 4 league defeats on the spin, 5 in the cup. I think they've scored 1 goal, and that was on opening day against Bristol City when they got tonked 4-1. It's funny how, like you say, we're 4 games into a season, another new manager, another big summer of change, and massive 12 signings. It's going to take. I think we were maybe spoiled, because they did well in pre-season. They won some games. They obviously got a decent point at Coventry. Played well against Oxford, and they've lost it. So maybe expectations grew because they beat Oxford. I don't know. Well,
we'll see, won't we? I mean, we've already seen a major sacking in Eric Ten Hag, who's suddenly been booted out of Bayer Leverkusen after 2 games in chat. I mean, has he been caught with his backside on the photocopier or something? I have no idea. But, it's a mad world. And I think every single year, managers' tenures seem to get smaller and smaller, don't they? So, would we be surprised if Sayers got the sack? I mean, I would be. But after Ten Hag got booted today, I wouldn't at all be surprised.
No. Right.
That's a different topic for a different podcast.
Yeah, we'll save that for another day. Right. Let's leave it there. Just Kathryn, final one from you on the window then. Just sum it up very quickly, how you think it's gone, both in terms of ins and out.
Very satisfied on the ins. I think championship experience is what we all wanted before the window opened, before we even had the transfer embargo. I think we've got that. Out, as much as I think it was probably the right time for Alfie Jones to leave, I'll always be a little bit sad, because you see him doing really well at Middlesbrough. You think, was it the right decision? I think maybe for him, he probably wanted that move, and maybe it was the right time. But other than that, I think everyone that's gone, again, still a little bit, a shame that we didn't manage to get the best out of Kamara, even though he could eventually come back. But overall, I think, with everything taken into account, I'm pretty happy with the signings they've made.
Fair. And Fletch, from you finally?
Yeah, I think they've been sensible. They've brought in some good experience of championship quality. That's what gets you through when you're trying to progress up the division, for me, I think. I think getting Geldhart back is a massive signing, because he'll have a full season now to show what he's worth. I'm really, really happy with the signing of Ollie McBurney. He's already showed his worth straight away. Lundstrom too, just following him behind. A couple of players that have returned in the division have done well, Ryan Giles. And then we'll see what the injured lads come back with. Maybe, did they need as many players as they did? I'm not sure. It feels like, signing 13 players has become the norm now. But if they all play a part, then I'm not going to complain.
And on that bombshell, we'll leave it there. Thanks, everybody, for watching this impromptu late night episode on deadline day of the 1904 Club. So that's it for Hull City. Transfer window closed. As I said, 12 signings in, 13 if you count Louis, but obviously at the minute we can't count him because he's not been signed officially. 19 departures. It's been a fascinating summer. It's been stressful. Lots of, it's this football club, isn't it? You never get a moment, from embargoes to restrictions to managers going, signings on and off. Here we are. It's the club that we know and love, and we'll now see how it all plays out over the next few weeks. Kathryn, thank you so much for joining us this time of night.
Thank you, and a happy birthday for tomorrow, and I hope you enjoy your food finally.
Yeah, it's gone cold, so I'm going to waz it in the microwave. Fletch, dearest, beautiful Fletch.
Good to see you. Good to
And
see
you?
you. And your jumper is magnificent.
Oh,
It's a lovely cultural zebra.
It's a very dull black jumper with a picture of a multicoloured zebra on. So you'll have to look at it on the YouTube. Right. That's it from us on deadline day. We will be back at some point. I'm off for a few days now, but we will be back at some point to preview Swansea ahead of Swansea. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good few days, and up those Tigers.